Oh, okay. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Recording to the cloud. Okay, great. Yeah, so in the past sessions, I think I've always built flows. The topic of today's session is a little bit different, and that we're going to be talking about the 3D space and what that means for a flow presentation and some of the aspects of 3D space. And Michael, just to give you a little heads up, I'm going to call on you in a little while to take us through one of your most favorite TikToks that has to do with a strong spatial component. And also, I'll probably ask you to say a few things about 3D space when viewed from VR. Okay. So I'm going to handle mostly 3D space as viewed on a 2D screen in the initial part of this discussion. As is always the case, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt. We want this to be a back and forth dialogue-y kind of session. So what I'm showing you here are various flows that I've used in these drop-in sessions. I'm going to come down. I'm going to start with this one right here, because for those of you, especially who are brand new to flow and have not been into the editor, I'm just going to show you some of the things that we've built in prior sessions. Okay, so this is a swarm of data. It's displayed in a 3D space that's 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. It's a cube, okay? Then, a lot of times we start with that kind of visualization, and then through use of the flow editor, we build maybe a scatter plot that looks like this. It's got a heavy 3D component where the time axis is going along the width axis. The measurement that we're involved with, the life expectancy in this case, that's along the height axis or the y-axis. And the depth axis, we've got countries around the world. On this one, we've got about 50 countries. So this, by its very nature, is kind of a busy chart. But you can see as I'm moving the screen around here, and for those of you who have not been onto Flow, I'm on a PC, and if I left-click my mouse and I drag it to the left, I rotate my camera around so I'm seeing it from that view. If I drag right, I can drag up and I can drag down. And depending what you want to see in this data, any of those positions, it can be desirable. Like if I wanted to really examine kind of the underbelly of life expectancy and focus in on where life expectancy has taken a hit over the last couple centuries, I might view it like this. Whereas if I wanted to just get a comparison of countries, maybe I look at it from this angle. But with 50 countries, I mean, this is a very, very busy scatter plot. It makes a lot more sense for comparison if I put a filter on it. Maybe so I just look at the European countries. Okay, it's a more friendly scatter plot if you're going to present it in some sort of presentation. Okay. So we've done a lot of that in these sessions. We've seen that scatter plot many times for many different reasons. We've also taken a look at many maps in these sessions and the way that elevation off the map can represent a value, such as population, let's say. These happen to be the 10,000 largest cities of the world. And if I click on this dot, this is Tokyo. In the data set I'm using, which is probably metro areas of these cities, 37 million people. It's the largest city in the world. And I've colored the dots here so that the very largest are red. The ones that are nearer the surface of the map are green or whatever, okay? And then we also have different ways of looking at the data. This is a different view of the world. This here, I've got the world in a Mercator view, a flat view, but I'm still using 3D space to give a lot of texture to it, okay? Okay, so that's all I want to show you on that flow. I just thought that's a good flow as an introduction to some of the practical uses of 3D space. So now let me come up here. I'm going to go into edit mode here rather than presentation mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you some things about the elements that we provide in 3D space. So in Flow, you can have any number of data swarms which are represented by the dots in here. Each one of these dots represents a row in a CSV file, or it's a data value. Okay, you can have any number of images. Here I've got a tiger and a hawk. Okay, you can have any number of text, text 1, 2, 3, and 4, just for demo purposes. And these objects can be located anywhere in the space. So in this particular view, if I move this space around here, you're going to see all these objects are really located along this center line in the space. And I've got one text object set up so it's always facing the camera. Okay, the others are not set up that way. Okay, just for this demo. So every object here is basically in the same kind of plane, and this cube of data is it's kind of the plane of where the other objects are. This cube of data is surrounding it. Okay. So now if I go on to my next step here, all I've done here is I've just repositioned these objects a bit. I've moved the map to the front, so you no longer see dots in front of it. I've moved the tiger back, and I've moved the hawk up front a little bit. So if I start to spin my camera position here now, you'll see all these objects now are kind of in different places in this 3D space. I've moved this text object back away from the camera as I have the tiger and the like. So, and notice here the swarm of dots, it has migrated a little bit with respect to all these data objects, and the swarm of dots is kind of at the center of mass of all these other objects. The center of the dots are. Okay. So the moral here is you can place these objects anywhere you want in this 3D space, and the effect you get, you can kind of control the effect you get by the placement of the dots, or the placement of the objects, I should say. Just a refresher here, or illumination for people who've never been into Flow. Every data object on every step is represented by a color cell in what we call the data objects timeline. This particular cell says on this step, which is step number 2 of a 5-step flow, I've got one data swarm, that's the dots. I've got one map of France. I've got the 2 images, the hawk and the tiger, and I've got 4 text blocks. So whenever you're examining a flow, you can kind of reverse engineer it by looking at the data object timeline, and you can get the definition of every one of these objects as presented on this step.
Hey, Bill?
Yep.
Apologies if I just missed this. I had some emails and texts coming in, so I might have missed it, but could you show us how you like move those images that are, you said you know, and I can see right now the hawk is more forward, so that'd be Z axis. So how do you, on XYZ, how do you move those right, left, up, and down?
Yep. There's a couple ways of moving them. One is click on the object, and you're given some handles here where you can then
just drag.
Okay. Yeah, you can drag and drop. Okay, that's one way. Another way, let's see, for this this hawk here, I think that's this object right here. Another way is click on the object. The definition of the object is displayed over here on the right hand page.
I see it now. Position.
These items right here are your friends in terms of crafting really interesting positional kinds of things in your flows.
Got it.
So these are all sliders. So if I wanted to slide this hawk left and right, I can do that from using this slider, or I could do up and down and close and far. So the position, the 3 dimensions of position, place it in the space. The rotation you can use if you wanted to, say if I wanted this tiger to be at a 45-degree angle for whatever reason, I could rotate it and do that. And you can also scale objects down here. Hey. So if I wanted this tiger to be 3 times the size it currently is, if I change this 1 to a 3, that was the hawk, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, so I changed it. So, these 3 items down here, as you get familiar with Flow, you'll find that these 3 things plus the camera setting, where you're positioning your camera, these are your weapons for coming up with really interesting positional attributes in your flows. Okay. That answer that okay, Dave?
Perfect, thanks.
Great, okay. Okay, let me go. Next step here. Okay, so what I've done here, all I've done here in this step, I just moved these objects into different positions. There was nothing particularly fancy I did here. I kind of lined all the text up so they're all right directly underneath each other in 3D space. And notice text 1 is the only one that I've set up to face the camera. If I wanted to set text 2 up to always be facing the camera, I click on it, I click the face camera. And now when I change my camera position, text 1 and text 2 are both going to track to the camera. Okay. So I didn't do anything else really special in this step. I just, I just wanted to show you that you have complete capability of putting these wherever you want. And when you do that, you'll achieve some sort of animation. Now, this is not really the topic is not animation. We'll cover that in a few sessions from now. But basically, animation occurs when an object or a dot is in one position on a prior step, and then you position it in a new position on the next step. You'll see objects will animate from where they were in the prior step to where they are in the subsequent step. Okay, so what I want to do here, I call this a very, very classic corporate use case. I mean, the number of times I've seen this use case in a corporate usage is near infinite, okay? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to play for you an animation that will take you through the foot traffic that occurred in several different retail establishments during the COVID year of 2020. Now, this is set up so it animates over a 24-second period. And what it does is it's set up so it gradually draws these curves for you. So you can kind of see how foot traffic went during the 2020 COVID year in these retail establishments. By the way, the establishments are the Home Depot. Let me just rotate this down a little bit so I can look at it. The Home Depot, Target, McDonald's, Costco, and Starbucks. So another great thing about the 3D space is, okay, these curves are very nice and they're positioned in 3D space, great. The other thing you can do is you can position your camera, the angle at which you look at these things, equally in 3D space. So in this case, suppose I was doing some analysis or whatever, and I was much more interested in what's going to happen in the future. And I just wanted to see what the trajectory of these curves were coming into the end of 2020. I might want to position my camera right here where I can kind of see maybe what the momentum is for these curves at the end of 2020, and it's gradually upward, which is great to know, I guess. Okay. Now, if I was looking at it more from a historian's standpoint, maybe I'd look at it from this angle here, where I just wanted to see at a glance, how things happened in 2020. So here, I mean, there's some great insights you could get, like toward the end of April and through the summer of 2020, Home Depot set some all-time records in foot traffic. And that's because people like you and me working at our home 24/7, we decided, hey, this place needs a little fixing up. So we ran out to Home Depot in record numbers during that period. You can also see here, Starbucks never really did recover in foot traffic for the entire year. All these establishments took a big hit initially, although Home Depot's hit was not very big actually, but they all took a hit, and they recovered in various ways at different rates, and there's reasons for that. And this kind of a curve gives you great insight into what actually happened there. Now, the reason I call this a classic and ubiquitous corporate use case is because every organization, doesn't even have to be a corporation, has a timeline against which they want to take a look at several curves, what's happening over the time, and they have an interest in being able to easily compare what's happened during those timelines. And they have an interest in being able to do some query. This is just a simple query that I set up for this scatter plot where I'm looking at the company, the date, 321. That's some sort of measure of foot traffic, I guess. And this was the fraction above where it started the year, where it ended up. So Target's foot traffic on November 28th is actually 27.5% above where it was at the beginning of the year, which was great for Target. So this is a 3D scatter plot. You've seen them before if you've been to some of these other sessions in the life expectancy context. This is more and more of a dollars and cents corporate context. So I just know every organization has curves like this. So I just wanted to provide that to you. And now what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you some more advice as to what you can do to learn as much as possible about flow, okay? And I'm gonna go over to the featured flows page here. Oops.
And Bill, would this be a good point for me to create a breakout room for anybody and come back in like 10 or 15 minutes? Or
sure, yeah, sure. Why don't you let people know what you want to do there, and people can either go there or stay here.
Okay, yeah, and then you or Sierra ping me if you want me to jump back over, and I got a bunch of demos lined up.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Okay, so you in the process of setting up the breakout room now?
Yep. Yeah, it will be there in just a second. So optional for anyone to join, but if you have any other questions, etc., I'll just create that room for you guys.
Yeah, and I've got probably about 5 or 6 more minutes to go, Michael.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so let me know when you're gonna leave. Okay, Michael's left. He's gone into his breakout room. Okay, one thing I recommend to all of you who are new with Flow is to go out to this location here. Maybe you've already been here, but maybe not. I'm going to send this to you here in the chat. Okay, if you go to a.flow.gl and look at the featured flows on that page, you will see about 20 to 25 flows. They're all different. They're all interesting. Many of them have been written by Michael and Jason. A couple of them have been written by customers of ours, like this one here, How Big is Big Tech? They're all very interesting, and you can get fabulous ideas for visualizations by going out onto this page. Okay. Now, one thing I wanted to do, since this is a session on 3D, I just wanted to take you through a couple of these flows here. Now, they probably won't render optimally, and Zoom, there'll be a little jumpiness. So you can go out here and you can click through these flows on your own. The first one I'm going to do is a flow that we call Trump tweets. We put this up a couple of years ago, and it basically is a way where we've captured every one of Donald Trump's tweets when he was in office. And I've always felt this flow is kind of a sleeper in what it does, and that it makes some very interesting use of 3D space. Let me load this in. Okay, this is taking longer to load than it normally does. Okay, here we go. Okay, every Trump tweet, there's 21,000 tweets here. So like we do in a lot of our flows, initially we take a look at it in a cube, and sure enough, there's exactly 21,000 plus dots in this cube. Okay. Then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go on to this next step. You'll see some animation here, and you'll see this cube. All of these tweets are being placed on a timeline, and the timeline on this particular, there's 2 timelines actually on this chart. One is the classical timeline expressed like month, day, or whatever. So here we go from February 2017 up through probably November 2020, or I forget what the last date is. That's one timeline. Another timeline is the hour of the day. Okay, so Flow doesn't care what you put on these various axes. I could have reversed this. Flow doesn't really care. But if you want to have a 3D experience, you know, just put whatever you want on your axes of a scatter plot. So this is, I've got hour of the day versus day of the duration, day of Trump's tenure as president. And here I've got the likes for the tweets. And I think all these dots are clickable, I think. Yeah. So, you know, if you want to click on this, you can find out exactly what that tweet was. It was on January 22nd, 2017 and the like, okay? Okay, so this is it's kind of an interesting exercise in 3D space. You can look at it from different angles. Just gorgeous to look at, okay? Now, if I advance this is a very short flow. It's only 3 steps in length. What I'm doing here is I'm doing a time travel down this axis, going from the beginning of Trump's presidency to the end. Then I just turned around here a little bit, and I'm kind of backing up to where this particular flow ends, which is August 2019, I guess, or let me see. A little bit late. Okay, it's January. Oh, what am I doing? I'm zooming the wrong way. Oops, wait a minute. Okay, took me a little bit to get my muscle memory going right here on this flow. So anyway, this is an interesting use of 3D space, and it shows you can actually have time axes going in 2 different directions on this flow. If you study this flow, you'll find there's some very interesting techniques for usage of 3D space and animation. The second one I want to show you is a brand new flow. By the way, a lot of really good things about this site is that there's always new stuff coming in. Okay, so you know, for week to week, you're probably going to find a couple new flows each time you go out here. Here's one you can see just from the thumbnail. This is going to be a timeline where time is going to the right, a measure is going up, and there's some sort of axis, depth axis is being used for something. This is the one I want to show you. This is something new that Jason Marsh of our company has been primarily working with. And I'm just going to show you how sometimes dimensions are not totally clear what they are, but you know they're telling you something. Okay. So this is just loading in. I think I've got a slower bandwidth at my house today for some particular reason. Okay, so this is pretty simple concept of this data. So here we start with 1880 and we go to 2020, okay? And what we're measuring is the deviation from the average temperature from 1900 to 1985 of temperatures in these particular time periods. Okay, so that's what this shows, and sure enough, this chart certainly shows that it's getting hotter. You know, it was much colder than the average in 1880, and now it's much warmer than the average. This is a 2D chart, and a lot of times what we'll do is instead of going right to 3D, we'll just throw a bunch of data on a 2D chart, and more often than not, you can actually learn a fair amount by what goes on to the 2D chart. So I'm going to advance on this flow. Okay, I'm looking at this. This is the northern hemisphere. Once again, this white line is my average, and I think this curve here is like the year 1880. Okay, so this shows that for every month of the year, January, February, March, April, up through December, every month of the year, 1880 had a colder than average average temperature. Okay, probably not surprising. So notice here the timeline is going in a circular fashion. It's not going out to the right as we normally look at it. It's going in a circular fashion. Just going to advance to the next step here. Okay, now here's what we're doing here. We're looking at the northern temperature data, and what we're seeing here is the white line is the average between 1880 and 1985, okay? You can see back here down the far reaches of this funnel, the temperatures are generally lower than the average, okay? And if I stand this on its ear here, you'll see that these years down at the bottom of the funnel, these are the years that are most distant in the past. So here I'm going from 1880, okay, all the way up to 2000, close to 2020. So this shows at a kind of an interesting glance how the temperature around the world is changing as a function of year. So here we've used the 3D space to show this in very unmistakable terms. The older years are definitely all around the year, they're definitely less than average. Then we come to a period of time here where it's kind of oscillating around the average. And then ever since that time, it's been strongly diverging from the average in a hot sense. So warming is definitely taking place. Okay. This is for the Northern Hemisphere. Northern Hemisphere has a disproportionate landmass in the world than the Southern Hemisphere. If we look at this same plot for the Southern Hemisphere, the same kind of effect is happening, but it's far less pronounced in the Southern Hemisphere. And we think that this is because there's so much water in the Southern Hemisphere that the oceans have a ameliorating effect on the rapidity at which warming takes place. Let me see, let me go into edit mode here. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pick one of these swarms here, okay? I think this one right here. This is my Northern Hemisphere swarm, I think. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna show you how this kind of chart is generated. There's no code in here. What we're doing here is I'm gonna go down to additional dimensions, okay? And I'm gonna take a look at the chart type that I've chosen for this in my additional dimension. This is a scatter plot first and foremost, but the way the scatter plot axes are displayed is according to this radar plot, 3D cylindrical additional dimensionality capability we have. So anyway, these kinds of displays, you have to root around a little bit to find, what it is to ideally convey the point you want to get across in your presentation. But we got lots of choices, and this is an amazingly good one, I think, for very clearly illustrating that, hey, global warming is really taking place, and it's in the Northern Hemisphere. It looks to me like it's kind of getting scary because it's, the rapidity at which the curve is deviating from the average seems to me to be accelerating. So let me just go one more step. This might just be a closing step. Oh, okay, we quite often do this too. We'll display two charts on the same, two charts on the same step. And this one here, it's kind of interesting. It's been done in an interesting way, and that there's a table of contents, a legend kind of chart here that's put in the middle here. And what it's doing, it's controlling what year, or excuse me, what month that you're looking at in some of these other axes. So some of these things are interrelated. Yeah, so here, okay. So this is June, I guess, yeah, okay, anyway, place of that. Yeah. So anyway, this is just an illustration of how we can interconnect some of these swarms of data. So let me open up for questions, and then I really want Michael to take you on a real quick tour of his favorite TikTok that shows 3D space, and then I also want him to provide a few comments on VR. And any questions before I invite Michael back? Okay, let's see. So
hey, Bill.
What's that?
Hey, Bill. Hey, I'm brand new to the idea of flow, so I'm definitely in the beginner stages of exploring what all this has to offer. So forgive me if there's other places for these questions, but a really simple question for you, Bill, is how does that data actually even get into flow to be manipulated?
Yeah, okay. Right now, the vast majority of the time it comes in on a CSV file.
Okay.
So what I'm doing down here is I'm looking at this swarm number 6, or excuse me, swarm number 1 on step 6, okay? And I can take a look at the CSV file that corresponds to that just by clicking this edit. Pretty simple, CSV file. You know, we've got the hemisphere or global is in this same column too. We got the year, we got the month, temperature anomaly plus or minus, and the time period type. Okay, this is by month. So, you know, a lot of these CSV files that you see in Flow are surprisingly simple, but the data is lurking within them and it's just begging to be displayed in a way where you can really see the impact of the data.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Bill.
Yeah. So we're also, by the way, in the process of building out interfaces to support other ways of getting data into Flow. We do actually have some customers who are doing real-time dynamic queries to populate the equivalent of the CSV files and move data into Flow. But most people start out with CSV files, and no limit on number of CSV files. And a CSV file is, there's basically, for each swarm, there is an associated CSV file. And a CSV file can populate more than one swarm if you wish. Any other architectural or observational questions here? Okay. Let's see. You know what? Actually, I've got in my house here. We've had a meeting today. I've got our CEO, Jason Marsh, and actually, what I'd like to do is just invite him to say a couple of words while I contact Michael. So that's kind of a curveball, but he's used to that.
No worries. Hey, everybody. Really fun to, I've just been sitting in the corner here watching Bill do this. It's really exciting to watch how professional and clean and organized he is to put this together. These trainings have just, I think, have gotten so good. I will say, since I did build this, now that I'm here, I will say that this interaction is only for the right-hand swarm, right? So each one of these, I'm highlighting just the June values, and the interactivity on the left-hand swarm is by clicking a dot, we can highlight that whole year, so you can really get a sense of how that year stands out from the rest of the data structure. Man, this data is already pretty old, and the gaps between these is pretty wild. But let me just say one more thing, which is that we've built this because people keep telling us that they want this or they need this, or how is this the right way to make this a meaningful product. We don't want it to be cool. We want it to be powerful. We want to give you that sense of mastery and control that is, you know, beyond cool and really helps you be more efficient on every day. If you think about cool, it really is mastery and control, right? Think about that great skateboard trick, or Iron Man flicking the atoms as he builds his environments around, he's trying to come up with a new element. That is mastery and control over gravity, mastery and control over information. Even a person who is like cool, you get that sense of they just know what they're about. They have control over their environment in a way, and the way their emotions, and it's something cool, right? So that definition of cool is not just cool, it's mastery and control. It's a more efficient way to build great mental models in the minds of your audience. And that's really what we've been trying to build here. We haven't tried to build something that looks pretty, although I do think it does look pretty. We haven't tried to be just cool, because if that's the case, maybe we'd be doing games. No, we want to help people make better decisions and accomplish their goals by communicating more effectively and understanding their data more effectively. So that's my little spiel, and I'm sticking with it. Thanks for coming today.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, and I'm really lucky here in that I get to interact with customers all around the world. And I really get a kick out of interacting with new customers who've got really interesting ideas. So just in the last week, I've worked with 3 really notable new customers. One's a guy in Poland who's put together a really great visualization of his company's sales kind of in a very innovative way. Another guy's a commercial real estate who's done a fabulous job in putting together all sorts of interesting visualizations on metrics having to do with commercial real estate. And I just talked to a guy today who's he's on the East Coast of the US, and he's putting together a real interesting study on Alzheimer's and how he's got a lot of data, and he's going to work on correlations as to, how, having to do with Alzheimer's. So Michael is back. The universe has infinite types of possibilities for data communications through data story communications through flow. Hey, Michael, I'm going to go off sharing here and ask you to take us through your favorite TikTok that demonstrates 3D space, and then a few comments about VR too.
Yep, sounds good. So my take in terms of the 3D space, I'm going to take a little bit of I don't know, it's not controversial space, but the thing I want to highlight is actually less about the story itself and more about how to leverage sort of the 3D space. Because I think oftentimes what people do is they take whatever they do and they throw it into a 3D space. And so it's 2D images in like a 3D space or just 3D for the sake of 3D. And what I found is that there's certain patterns that have emerged. One of which is starting with a frequency map. So the frequency here is our first 7 weeks of our child's life and every interaction we had with that child, which is mostly diaper changes and feedings. And the bottle feed was my small contribution in this endeavor, besides other help. But then that we could actually take that same elements and then add them up as well. And so we're starting to layer on sort of all these different ways to look at the same content. And that's sort of one thing that I'm really big about. It's like, how are you showing that transition from one thing to the next? And that with that space, you can really open up the aperture. So this is way more of a VR focused view, but this is an exploration of all of the Voices of VR podcast episodes that have been released. And they're all sorted based on these categories. And so the closer the dot is to these categories, the more it's being drawn to it. So each acts as like a center of gravity to pull it towards it. And so that's sort of an experiment in using 3D space to actually show clusters with, in this case, I think it's a dendrogram. I forget how many sides it has. But I think that's sort of another aspect. And then lastly, just in this last conversation, we were even talking about hierarchies. And I think hierarchies are actually a hugely sort of undertapped area in terms of what you can really start to do with hierarchies that leverage the 3D space. Because now you're tying, in this case, it's actually geospatial with a hierarchy. So we're showing this hierarchy. In this case, I think it's of the number of children the number of children under 6. And so I won't go too much into detail on the specifics here, but I'm just trying to give sort of a lay of the land in some sense that a lot of these capabilities are really unlocked through incremental change. And that even just that baby story, the 3D-ness, could come from using a 24-hour clock here and making it more of this cylindrical look, which we jokingly called the ringer. And so, so there's a lot more examples I can show, even just hierarchies like this, and then the use of space where you can actually arch it around someone allows you to give a clearer picture when it's in a 3D space as opposed to being flat. And then lastly, just in terms of geospatial data, that it's a very undertapped area in terms of capabilities to tie time series data with geospatial data and interactions like that. So I'm sort of giving a real big overview here, but
hey, Michael, could you take us through one of your TikToks?
You mean like the actual video itself?
Yeah. So we can see how the 3D spatial things work in the context of a real 3D environment.
Got it. Oh, okay. Sorry, I misinterpreted what you were describing here. So you're talking about more like this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Sorry about that. So yeah, so in this environment, there's two cell phones. So my wife's holding a phone that is centered down the location, and I'm holding a phone. You'll notice that there's a little icon over my face, which is my cell phone in the scene. And that is how I'm controlling the action. So when I present and I click the next button, that's how the whole presentation moves forward. And so the use of space here, one thing you need to do is if you're presenting, you have to stand behind the content. So we don't have obfuscation yet. So it won't be able to tell who's in front of what, at least not yet. And so that's one sort of consideration to make there. Yeah, are there other things I should try to highlight about the 3D-ness of it? I guess was there any specific things you wanted me to cover, Bill?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's really interesting. You can see a real 3D chart in a real 3D space. And what we're doing is we're getting increasing use of this technique amongst our customer base. So it's really exciting to us that we got customers who are now producing these AR videos. We have documentation on it and the like, and it's really an interesting thing that's evolving. Maybe just one other quick comment, Michael, is just a few comments about 3D space when you're in VR, when you've got a headset on, just some fundamental principles of that.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great question. We're actually just going through a little bit of this. So in a VR environment, one of the things we do by default, and you'll see this in the settings panel, and it's actually a bit hidden under advanced, but it's scale in VR. So we scale the world by 3x when you go into VR by default. And if you want to change that, so it is still one-to-one relationship, you would change it in your settings here. So that's just one thing to sort of note. And then the other considerations are, when you're in the scene, what can you see and what can you interact with? Because if you just look at a static image, it's a little, there's less to take in. But what we can do is add some interactions. And the thing to note here is that we have overlay text, which when you click on a dot, will pull up information and put it in this little box. And that works on flat screens and mobile phones. However, for VR environments or AR environments, you'll want to use 3D text. And so with 3D text is essentially the same thing, but it is in the environment itself, as opposed to being overlaid on top of the HTML page. So this is actually, in the scene itself, and you can see the little line attaching it to the dot. And so that's one thing you'll want to also add in. So those are the main considerations, but we really have built the platform so that you don't need to think about what the end, person is going to consume it on, because by default, we work on every phone, every computer browser, VR headsets in the browser, AR headsets in the browser. And so the idea is that it doesn't matter what device you're on, you can access the flow, you can participate, and you can have the best experience for that device.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Yeah. Hey, does anybody have any questions about anything we've covered today?
I have one quick question about the AR use of flow. Michael, so like in the TikTok examples that you use, and I follow you, I appreciate your content. That's how I found out about flow. Awesome. In that context, like, do you have to use a third-party software to merge the flow with your live video? Like, or no. Is that all? Okay.
Yeah. So it's just a screen capture. Is actually what's going on for that. So okay. Let me pull up one example, and I think we have this in our help guide or our AR user guide. Let me just pull one up real quick. So this was very early on, but this is just a quick demonstration. So the screen in the back is the actual phone image. And so basically I started the meeting and then I hit the AR button on my phone, and that's how I drop into the scene. And all I'm doing is just doing a screen recording, which is built into iOS, and for Android, I think there's an app or something. Then the other key is like whoever else is recording, and then, or if you could just do it yourself, but then they join the meeting. So now you're in the same meeting. And the one thing you have to do is recenter on the exact same points. So I'm sort of flying through it in this video, make it seem really, really fast and easy, but it does take a little time to sort of, just get practiced, and, it's yeah.
Right, to make it all look clean and coherent. But that answered my question, because I was wondering, do I have to have a third-party editing software to glue it all together? That's awesome. I mean, that little demo answered the question I was concerned about. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, the only editing I think we ever do is just audio. And that's mostly because if I'm standing over there, then I usually capture the audio on the phone I'm holding, and then I just take that audio and put it with the other video. So that's the extent of it, basically.
Perfect. That makes sense. Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, Michael, I have a question about animations. So I see in your TikTok videos, and also what Bill showed, that there was an animation. Do you have any control over that? Is that all? I know there's like an automated animation when you go from step to step, but can you control the frames?
You can't control the individual frames in playback. The controls you have in the editor to control the animation duration and other things, that is done. Let me share my screen. Yeah. So on the same flow, let me just go ahead and add a step here, and I'm just going to do nothing and just make this flat. So that is going to be our step. It's just going flat. So you'll see that it animates by default, and the main thing to change is in step details, and that's the animation duration to next step. So long durations will be much more elegant and these more theatrical. And so the example that Bill gave for that time series data of foot traffic, great example of just, I think it was like a 15 or 20-second transition. And so that actually allows you to interpret during the transition period. Or you could set it to, I usually do like, between 4 and 6 usually is my go-to, but everyone has their own preferences there. And with that duration, the only other sort of attribute we have access to there's two things. So one is this animation section. And within here, there is control to say ripple animation or not ripple. So I'll just, as opposed to telling you, I'll just show you what the difference is. So, and actually, sorry, let me set the camera in the same spot so we don't get confused on what's actually going on. So I'm setting the camera, by the way, in the top left-hand corner. And so that's set per step. And then as a very minor detail here, just because we're on it, you can actually click this button for camera position preview, and then you'll actually see where those camera positions are per step, and you can click onto them and see them to see if they're at the same spot. So, yep. And so, so with that, so the ripple animation is each individual dot performs its action and basically ripples through the whole data set row by row based on the order in which it was loaded. To not ripple data set, to not ripple means every dot moves at the same time. So if I uncheck ripple, now when I click, okay, I think I might have to save and refresh. So if I uncheck ripple and I save and refresh, then it should hopefully take hold. Now it's not doing a ripple, but instead every dot's moving at the same time. And there are certain instances where that is actually really valuable to do for the animation purpose. And then the only other things to note, duration and item duration. So that is applicable when you do a ripple animation. The duration is the total time for the whole animation, and then item duration is each individual dot. How long does it take for it to get from point A to its final destination? So even though the whole scene will take, in this case, 300 milliseconds, it'll take 800 milliseconds for every individual dot to move. So we do have some animation control here. The only other one to really note, and actually is probably the hardest part about it, in my opinion, is this idea that on the scatter plot, and I'm just going to set it up real quick. that oftentimes you want to show something animate over time. And the trick, quote unquote, I don't know if trick is the right word for it, is basically I'm setting 2 steps and I want to apply a filter to the first step. And so when I click that filter, if I filter the year by default, and I'm going to say, let's say less than 1855. So I have a few values here. So you'll notice that the domain or the x-axis already updated. So it's not showing the whole picture. And so the trick is this little button right here, hide filtered categories. If I uncheck that, now the same domain of the x-axis remains. And so now I can basically show that animation. And sorry, let me go back. And so now when I click next, you'll see it animate through to the next step. As opposed to if I had this unchecked, or if I had it checked rather, then it would update the domain and then go to position. So these are sort of minor things that you don't notice necessarily your first few times, but is sort of an important distinction of how you can start to build some of these.
Michael, you said the ripple, does that go by just rows or can you set it to columns too?
What I meant by rows is that if you think of this data set, every row here is a dot. And so we have a point per row is like the instance, I guess, or the category. And so the ripple is based on the order of these. So this is going to go year country as like, it's going to go for each country through the years and populate those first. But if I had it ordered by year and then country kept iterating through, then all of them would go together and it would animate that way. Does that make sense? Yeah, good.
I didn't know if you could swap it and make it go by columns instead of rows.
Right. I don't believe so. Yeah, I don't believe so. But unless what you're thinking is we have another option, instead of point per row, we can say point per value, which actually I've started using a lot more lately. But what that allows you to do is for every dot, it's basically saying for this column, in this case, life expectancy, every point equals 1 value. So in this case, at each one of these points, actually, you can't really see it because it doesn't look like anything's different, but within additional dimensions, if I add some dispersion, which is basically separating the dots, that I can see that there's quite a lot of dots on each one of those dots because now it's just tallying them up. And so this is usually you use this when you're looking at more like histograms and things like that. So in this case, what I could do is like year and country. And then on the additional dimensions, I could add something just like stacks. We have some like basic primitives here. And then basically I'm getting the exact same curve or the exact same thing that you can build with lines, but instead I built it with dots, or they're actually stacked on top of one another. And so same level interaction. So it's actually surprisingly powerful, partially because it will automatically stack. And so the idea that I can go from this, and then if I collapse the depth axis, they will actually stack on top of one another. And so I end up with this, another view. And so actually, I think it's actually way more powerful. There's more power to the point per value than we've necessarily explored, because most of the flows you'll see are built with point per row. But yeah, hopefully that, I don't know if that was really your question. I know you're asking about the application of it, but I do think that, basically it is looking at a column and then using that as the input for the creation of dots.
Yep.
Take a look at that view there. I just got to say, show that view again, Michael.
This one's cool, right?
Yeah, look at the gap there in 1918. You see that big line through the middle of the view? That's the life expectancy drop of 1918.
Yeah, he's talking about
Yep, right there.
So, yep.
Yep. So I usually indicate when I teach a class, I usually say there are trillions and trillions of different combinations in which you can put things together and flow, and that might be a low estimate. I mean, with all these options and different ways of viewing things. I mean, many different possibilities.
Yeah, but you know, I was just having a conversation, and you know, just hearing what you're trying to create, or you know, some of the things you're encountering is really helpful to hear. So, you know, if you have an idea or there's something you want to do and it's a little confusing, we recognize that we're always updating our materials, and you know, you'll see videos that might look a little older, and it's because they are older, and it's not necessarily the same UI look and feel. But we're constantly trying to update all of that material, and we are here for you, and we'll make sure you're successful. So please don't hesitate to reach out, because it really helps us direct our efforts in terms of what to prioritize and you know, what trainings or help we should really focus on next.
Great. I guess with that, you know, one final ask if there are any questions, and then if not, we'll adjourn. And anybody got anything else? Okay, well, great. Well, thanks. Hey, thanks for attending. Enjoyed seeing you all, and hope you have a really good adventures with Flow, and we'll wait to hear from you.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot,
everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Bill. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.